Well, what a story. I love that one. And it's very appropriate for the time that we're living through. Now, according to one medical website, the top 10 fears are these: heights, public speaking, snakes, flying, spiders, crowds or being outside, clowns, that's a funny one, enclosed spaces, mice or rats, and the dark. I wonder if you have any of those fears or phobias, or if there's anything else that you have as a fear or phobia. Why not leave a comment below with what you experience fear with? Well, as serious as those fears can be, we often experience other serious kinds of fears as well. At this time, many people are, of course, fearful of our situation with coronavirus. People are fearful of contracting the virus in the first place. People are fearful of being isolated. People are fearful of dying. Other people I've heard are expressing almost defiance in the face of this. I've been hearing some people saying that it's a lot of fuss about not so much. To do that is to attempt to minimize the experience that we're going through. Other people are saying that with our human efforts we can get through this. And to do that is to place our confidence in humanity and in our abilities. So is it the case that it's wrong to be fearful? Is the right approach to try and reduce and minimize that we naturally fear? Or is it right to place our confidence in ourselves? Well, our passage today will help us in thinking that through. There are three sets of pairings that I want us to see in this story. The first of those pairings is the level of fear with the disciples and with Jesus. So Jesus has been busily teaching the people about what it means to be in the kingdom of God, and then he suggests to his disciples that they cross the lake. The details are that it's evening and darkness is quite possibly upon them. The Sea of Galilee that they're sailing across was prone to sudden storms because of its geography, and as they're crossing, one of these storms whips up, except this one is one of the worst that they've ever seen. This is described in verse 37 as a furious squall. That's a major windstorm. Waves are beginning to break over the boat, and the boat is filling up with water so that it might sink. Not only that, but these disciples were very experienced sailors and fishermen, some of them at least. They were experienced on this very body of water. And if they're scared, then surely it means that nothing like this has happened before. They're so fearful that they think they're going to die. Now, haven't we heard a lot recently that this is something that has never happened before, a bit like this storm that probably was something they'd never experienced at that level before. We're all hearing that this virus is a once-in-a-generation thing. We're hearing that this is unprecedented. That's because of how global our world has become. It's because of how unfamiliar we have become with seriously spreading illnesses. And because of that, this is unprecedented. Well, in panic of their unprecedented situation, the disciples go to find Jesus. But in contrast to their fear, what is Jesus doing? Well, he's calm as anything because he's asleep. Isn't that amazing that Jesus is able to rest even as this storm rages around him? I've had a few sleepless nights recently because of the storminess of our current circumstances. But Jesus lives out the words of Psalm 4, which says, "In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety." There is something very different to Jesus compared to his disciples, compared to the rest of humankind, because he's able to rest in the midst of the storm. We see the difference of Jesus especially in the next pairing as well, and this pairing is in the two rebukes that Jesus gives. As the storm is raging around him, as he rubs the sleep from his eyes, having just been woken up, he stands up in the boat and tells the wind and the waves off. He shouts at them, "Quiet, be still." Can you imagine doing this? Maybe you've been on a choppy ferry crossing before. Have you ever thought in those circumstances of standing up and telling off the wind and ordering the waves to stop? If you tried to do that, you'd look like an idiot. Well, imagine Jesus just happened to get it lucky, that he just happened to tell them off at the same time as the wind just happened to stop. Well, that's entirely plausible with the wind. But the waves, whilst wind can stop in a moment, waves take a long time to die out. They gradually fade to nothing. There is no way Jesus could have just got lucky. Instead, it shows that he has the power and authority to stop the waves. By him having this authority over the natural elements, he is showing that he's more than just a human like you and I. He's showing that he's God. The first half of the Bible teaches in several places that it is God who has charge over the natural forces of this world, and that he is able to stop them at will. For example, Psalm 107 tells us that God can speak to the waves in order to cause them to mount up, but then that he can also still the storms and the waves to nothing a moment later. So Jesus rebuking the wind and the waves, by him doing that, he is telling us that he is God. That's the first rebuke. The next rebuke is to his disciples. It's a much gentler rebuke. It's in verse 40. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" He's not saying that there was no reason to be fearful at all. Fear is only natural at times. But it's that by now they should have been beginning to realize who Jesus is, about how they can trust him, even in the crisis situations of things like this storm. After all, it was Jesus who suggested that they cross the sea in the first place, and he would have known that this storm was coming. The rebuke is not to the natural reaction of fear, but to their lack of trust in him. Trust in Jesus is what draws alongside our fears and helps us to keep our fears in check. In the midst of the chaos that we are facing and our fears that naturally arise, we must make sure that we exercise our trust in Jesus. He is with us in this storm of coronavirus, and he wants us to be able to rest in its chaos because of our faith in him. Now, that doesn't mean complacency or self-reliance. It doesn't mean doing nothing, but it means confidence that is located in the right person. Not confidence in ourselves, but confidence in Jesus. Jesus' rebuke to his disciples encourages us to have faith in him. He is the source of our confidence. When we know who he truly is, we need not fear in the same kind of way as before. The final pairing is of the disciples and their two fears. You see, as the storm comes, what happens to their fear? Well, it disappears, doesn't it? If there are no longer any waves and any wind, what have they got to fear? Except it's not that they now have no fear, it's just that their fear has shifted from being focused on the storm to being focused on this man who has stood right in front of them, who's just told off the wind and the waves and has just told them off for not having enough faith in him. One moment they're fearful that this storm might kill them. The next, they're fearful because the person stood in front of them is even more powerful than the storm. But it's not a fear that he might kill them, of course not. It's a fear that actually he's so much greater than they realized before. It's a fear that is the kind of fear that in the first half of the Bible was to be directed to God. A fear that is reverence and adoration. This is a fear that is worship. So in the midst of our situation, we need to remember who Jesus is. We need to remember that he is the all-powerful God-man who has not lost control of the situation, but is calm and restful even in the worst of scenarios. And that's because he has authority over the whole cosmos. He's the one who gave his life so that we might have that trust in him, so that we might know him. And so we can have faith and confidence in him at this time, even at a time such as this. So let me encourage you to keep on seeking him, to keep on trusting him through this time. Keep on worshipping him in reverence and awe. Or maybe you've not yet come to know him for yourself. Well, why not get to know him by reading the Bible? Read the Gospel of Mark that we've just been reading from. It tells you of the life story of Jesus, of who he is, what he came to do in giving his life for us, and how we can put our hope in him and therefore follow him. You see, now would be a great time to have faith in him.